Hi, my name's Danielle Clode and I'm coming to you today from the meeting ground of the Peramangk and Kaurna people in the heart of the Adelaide Hills. And I'm really excited to be talking to you today about my new book on koalas. I've been writing about Australian natural history and environment for the last 20 years or so. I've written books on killer whales, prehistoric megafauna of Australia, bushfires, the eucalypt forests of the country, and all sorts of other fascinating topics, including the story of the scientists and the work behind the scenes at museums and zoos and places like that. So you can imagine how excited I was when Black Ink approached me and asked me to write a book on one of our most iconic and distinctive animals. Koalas are just so quintessentially Australian and so amazingly idiosyncratic and individual and unique and different to any other animal in the world. I guess that's one of the great mysteries about koalas, is that they are so famous and so popular, and yet we seem to know so little about them. They're simultaneously thought to be going extinct on the east coast. Their populations are declining rapidly, and we've seen some absolute tragedies in recent years with the bushfires down the east coast and huge swathes of koala populations being damaged and destroyed by those bushfires. We've got massive problems with land clearance, with predation and with disease in koala populations. And yet, at the same time, in places like this, we have an abundance of koalas. We have so many koalas in the southern forests of Australia that they actually can overpopulate and eat out their food supply. So there are actually so many koalas that they can kill the forests they would depend upon. So what does all this mean for the future of koalas in Australia? I guess in order to understand where koalas are going and how they're going to adapt in a changing world, we have to understand where they've come from. And I think uncovering the prehistory of the koalas, the fossil history of koalas, has been one of the greatest revelations to me in this journey. You know, when I first started this book, I thought that koalas would be quite simple and, you know, there's not a lot of complications to a koala's life. They spend 90% of their time asleep, they live in trees, they eat gum leaves. How difficult can it be to tell the story of koalas? And the thing I've found is that they're actually one of the most amazingly complicated animals I've ever come across. And I've spent a lot of time with Australian animals. I have a doctorate in zoology and animal behaviour. I've worked in zoos and museums, so it's not like I'm unfamiliar with the problems of studying animals. But koalas are really quite incredible. I think even the koala experts I've spoken to all across the country are all stress how astonishing they are, and how every time you do a little bit more research on them, they come up with something new. They do something different. The koalas in Queensland behave quite differently. They look quite different from the ones in the southern forests. And I think that's really the secret. Part of the secret of koalas' success is that they're actually highly adaptable and behaviourally flexible animals. So I think very often we have a perception that koalas are like pandas or a lot of other highly, blue whales or other highly endangered animals, that they're on the brink of extinction, that they've made some bad evolutionary choices, and because they're so specialised they can't possibly survive in the modern world. I think the thing that I've learned in the process of writing this book is that the opposite is true. Koalas are incredibly resilient. They have survived for so long through so many changes. Most of their cohort has gone extinct. They're the last surviving members of their tribe, of their group, and they're incredibly adaptable. And I think the variations between the populations we have in Australia demonstrates that they can survive deforestation to a certain extent. They can survive bushfires. They can even survive disease and predation and hunting and all of these pressures that we've put upon them. Even climate change they have been resilient to. But they can't survive all of those things all at once. And I think in some places on the east coast of Australia, that's what's happening. They have a perfect storm of all these factors impacting them. And we only have to lighten the load of some of those things to let the koalas have a chance of bouncing back. The trouble is we're not giving them that break. So I think this journey to understand how koalas cope and survive in the modern world has been an absolute eye-opener for me. I've learnt so much about koalas, from their amazing hands with their Vulcan fingers and their fingerprints like we have, their incredible stomachs. Their stomachs are just amazing. The way they've adapted to the eucalypt forests and the story of the eucalypts and how they've evolved and diversified. Their breeding systems, the way they look after their young, their wonderful social interactions, surprisingly, for a solitary animal. They're really interesting in how they interact with others, with other koalas as well as with people. They're not typically very afraid of people. They might not always want to socialize with people, but they don't have a flight response from people. So they're more of a move away kind of response. But they're really interested and curious animals. They're quite interested in seeing what people are doing and what they're up to, and they recognize individuals and form bonds with individuals. And that makes them very appealing, especially to people wildlife carers who want to look after them. We have a really strong connection to koalas. Their faces attract us. They hold their arms up to be held. They're immensely appealing. But they also have a lot to teach us about our own place in the world, because we share a lot of similarities with them, and how we can protect both our own and their world in a better way in the future. So I hope you'll join with me in exploring the world of koalas, a life in trees. Thank you.